We're about to start looking at how to create 2D detailing, but in order to make that look the best we first want to go into our option element attributes and change our pens and colors. So when we go into options, element attributes, pens and colors, we see that there is some preset pen sets. We can look through those: print color fills, print black and white, color conceptual, blah blah blah. There's all these different pen sets. We can make up our own. We can edit these ones. Now for, again, what I want to do, what I'm trying to do here with creating two-dimensional drafting, these aren't very good. Now we can spend a fair bit of time fixing this ourselves, or we can download these. So some places have other ones of these available. I've created some myself. They're at www.archicad.com. But if we just want to edit them for ourselves or create them for ourselves, we can use one of these to start with. We could use one that's quite colorful and just make some small changes to that. Or we could start with one that's very simple, and then we're already maybe closer to the way there. So I'm going to start with this one here called modeling. And I'm going to edit this, and as soon as we see it, we edit it, then it gives us the ability to make changes. So I'm going to show you how to edit pens, the fastest way I know how. So we're going to click on pen 1, and then if I was to click all the way through. So if we hold Shift, we can select all the way through. 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10. So I want to choose the first 10 pens. And I want to make them all black.
Did you just double click on the black next to the pen weight?
Yep. So I double clicked on the pen, and then I could, mine's Apple, yours is PC, so you have slightly different methods, but there's a color wheel, there's a color slider, there's colors to choose from. There's one that looks like here, spectrum, and then there's, I've got like a crayon pencil one, which is very helpful. You don't have this one. You've got something similar though. I then want to make pen 11 white.
So we choose 11.
I then want to make pen number 19 white as well, which it already is, so I'm going to leave it white. But between pens 12 to 18, I want to make them different scales of grey. So I'm going to select each one, and I'm going to choose different greys. Now again, your ability to do this is dependent on what type of computer you're using. This is one of the reasons why I like using Apple, because it does make this a little bit easier.
So we don't have those options.
No. You have to work with a scale bar on the side.
You've got some different ones though. You've got some different ways of doing this. So yeah, Apple had these metals, which made that very easy to do, but there's other ways to do it as well. And generally I'll leave the next one, the last one, pen 20 as red. Now that's all we're going to do at the moment. You could go through and change all of these pens to be all different colors, but I chose this one because it already had a lot of nice colors, so we don't need to necessarily do it all. All that I want you to do now is to change the pen width. So if we look through these, some of them have the same pen widths and some of them have different pen widths. Mostly all of these are 0.18. So what I want to do is to go through my pens and change pen 1 to 0.1. I want to make pen 2 0.2, pen 3 0.3, and hopefully you're getting the gist of where I'm going with this. Now my numbers are getting a bit sticky, which is a bit annoying. 4 to be 0.4, 5 to be 0.5, and so on. If you accidentally get out of it, go back in. Thankfully you don't lose it all straight away. And we want to finish this off. I pressed enter, which got me out of the file. And then finally, for the 10th pen, we want to change that to 1 millimeter. So it's going to be a very thick pen.
What about the whites and greys?
Now I can leave those just as they are, or I can change them all to be something like 0.2. And generally speaking, I want the last one, the last red one, to be quite thick. So I'm going to make this 1.4. Sometimes I might even make it 1. So a very, very thick pen. I'm going to use this for markups maybe. Now there's a lot of other options, a lot of other things we can do, and if you have a look at what I've done with the ArchiCAD pens, you'll see that I've sort of custom made all of them, and I'll explain that to you later. But for now, that's fine. That's all we need for now. We're going to go store as. We don't want to get out of this again without saving this properly. Store as, and just rename it as your own name. So write your own name. And press OK. That's now saved to the file. You can even export that out of this file and put this into another file if you've already created a file in ArchiCAD and you want to change that one. Took a little bit of time, but it's going to save you a lot of time or make your work better from now on. And so, of course, the longer you use ArchiCAD, the more you value making these sorts of changes or upgrades, personalizations to make ArchiCAD work better for you. All right, what are we going to do? Like I talked about at the very start, there is different places to draw in ArchiCAD, and we're going to stay in this file to do our next type of project assessment. Into our worksheets, so under the project map there's stories, then it says sections, elevations, interior elevations, and then it says worksheets, and we're going to work under the worksheets in another folder called details. Details is currently empty. I'm going to right click on that and press new independent detail. Now I get to name it. I'm going to get rid of the reference ID. I don't want a reference ID. And we'll just rename this as 2D construction details. Now, what is our worksheets and our details? They're infinitely large two-dimensional universes, where our stories is effectively a infinitely large three-dimensional universe. So it's in the same file, the same ArchiCAD file, but it's a separate space, which is good because it means we can't accidentally edit between them. But we can relate them, we can overlay them, we can trace reference them, and that's also very helpful. So we're going to start drawing what we had drawn on the board in week 1. Drawing some construction detailing. Now these should be based on photos that you took when you were on site of the real project, of the house as it stood. We want to draw the standard types of construction scenarios that we see. So the first one that we're going to create, starting from the ground up, is we're going to create a pier. We're going to create what we called an engaged pier. Now we're going to start from the very bottom, start from ground. How does the ground connect to the brick? There's a piece of concrete, we call that a footing. And we'll start with that footing. So when we go to our fill tool, we're not going to draw with lines, we're going to try to draw everything with fills because I find it so much faster. Now we're currently in a layer called Fill General. We can stay in that layer if we want to, or we can draw this in the ArchiCAD layer. ArchiCAD layer will be fine. Now just like with the Mesh tool, when we go to the Fill tool, click in the Settings dialog box, we see that there's a few different settings that we can use. I just want to talk about this in a little bit of detail because sometimes this gets very confusing for people. The first thing we see is that we can have an outline or we can turn the outline off. In this instance, we want to have an outline. That's going to make our drawings look great. And we want that outline to be a black pen, but we probably don't want it to be a very thin pen. So in this instance, we're going to start by making our outline pen number 4. The next box down is we have the ability to use different types of fills. Drafting fills, cover fills, cut fill building material. Now depending on which one of these you choose, your list of fills will become reduced. What I want you to do is to change this to drafting fills, simple 2D drafting fills, and that's going to mean that your list of fills is much, much bigger. Whereas if you change that to the bottom one, cut fills building materials, we see that our list is considerably smaller. So if you are wondering, where did all my fills go? It's because you're in the wrong type. So we want to change that to drafting fills. And then we've got a very, very large list of fills. Sometimes the problem is there's too many fills here or they're not very good. So I'm going to show you through the ones that I would like you to use. Just because ArchiCAD says something doesn't mean it's good. So they've got one here called concrete reinforced, and it's a very, very bad fill to use for concrete. There is one here called concrete in situ, and that's one that I'm happy for you to use. What's the setting that we want? In this case, I want you to have a foreground pen, which is a very thin pen, so we're going to make that number 1. And we want to have a background pen that makes it look grey, like concrete. So we're going to use pen 13. None of the rest of this information is relevant, and we're going to draw a fill. So once you've got all of that fill information, press OK. And then we're going to draw a fill. Now, like I said before, my preferred method for drawing these sorts of boxes is using the rotated rectangular method, which means we'll draw in one direction and then we'll come back in the other. So I'm going to draw a footing, and we're going to make this footing, zoom in a bit, we're going to make this footing 400, so we'll type in D, 400, enter, and we'll go down and type in 400 again. So we've got our fill, which is our footing, but it looks a bit odd. Doesn't look right. Why does it not look right? The scale. Because we need to remember that we always draw in ArchiCAD at 1:1, but we don't always represent that way. What would we want to be making this detail at? We could probably be wanting to make it represent at 1 to 10. So if I change this drawing to 1 to 10, we now go, oh, okay, that now makes a bit more sense. That fill now looks a little bit more accurate with how it should in terms of representing concrete. Now straight away I want to explain this to you why we're talking about line weights and pens. So if I right click and say show true line weight, what we see is we've got a thick outline pen and then a thin hatch pen or fill pen. Now let's just fiddle with this for a second and we'll change this to, instead of being that one, we'll change this to concrete reinforced.
My color is different from yours. Mine is okay.
Yeah. So look at this one. Does that look like concrete? That doesn't look like concrete to me. So we shouldn't have 100 millimeter aggregate in our concrete. So no, and this is the problem. This is why I say ArchiCAD is a tool. The tool is only as good as the person who's using it. So we can't expect that ArchiCAD's going to always do the right thing for us. We need to understand what it should look like. Now, I said before, I'm happy for you to use concrete structural.
So how do you change the...
Concrete structural or structural concrete? Concrete. I'm happy for you to use this, but I still don't think this is brilliant. And for that reason, I wouldn't want to use that for my own project. So what I do, make my own fill. So we can change our own pens, we can make our own fills, we can change our own lines, we can make our own layer combinations, we can customize almost everything in ArchiCAD. Now that sounds like a lot of work. It is a lot of work. But like I said, as you use ArchiCAD, the more you use it, the more you value maybe that individuality, value it being the way that you want it to be. So that can take a lot of time, or you buy a template or you get someone else to do it for you. And big companies generally employ people to manage their template files. And they want everyone in their office to work exactly the same way so that they can manage and control that it's done effectively. Otherwise, you could have 100 different people working in 100 different ways, and then if someone else had to take over partway through the project, it would look different. They wouldn't know where to find things. They wouldn't know how to use it. So creating systems is very important. ArchiCAD has some systems, but we can always change those systems. So it's important to understand how we need to work and try to work in a consistent way.
Alright, how did you change the last concrete?
So what I did was to change between different fill types. That's not what I want you to do. I want you to keep with the same fill type that you have. I just wanted to show you different methods. Now, there's one issue with this, and that's that this one uses dots. It uses dots to show the sand, but the dots are so small that they don't actually print very well. And so even though I chose pen 1 before, I actually might want to change that to pen 2, just so the dots are bigger, and so the dots actually print. So we have to be a little bit thoughtful of what that means and how that works and how that represents in our drawings, particularly when we print them. Because at the moment we're looking at a screen, and the screen doesn't always give us a great, a realistic, a perfect representation of what it will look like when it prints. Great. The next thing, we're going to start drawing the other types of building materials. So one of the next most important building materials that we're going to need is to draw a brick. So let's go back into our fill tools, fill settings, and now we're going to change those settings. Now, concrete is more important structurally than the brick, so we're going to use a thinner outline pen. I'm going to change it now to pen number 3. I'm going to change the type of fill that I use, and again this is where I have some issue with how ArchiCAD works, but we're going to use this one here at the moment that's called brickwork. And I want to change the background color to be a orange color.
Deep orange.
I was just about to make a point of that. So I'm going to make it deep orange, and then I'm going to say, oh, that's a bit too strong. We're going to change that. Sometimes I deliberately do the wrong thing in order to be able to explain what I'm trying to explain. All right, so I'm going to draw, and I'm deliberately drawing this not in conjunction with the concrete at the moment. So I'm going to draw a brick. How big is a brick? We're going to measure across first. Again, I like using my rotated rectangular method. 110 is the thickness of a brick. And how tall is a brick? 76 millimeters. Now you might be starting to say, I don't know the answers to those questions. And that's a very good point. Again, when we're doing this type of drawing in ArchiCAD, this is 2D drafting, and we could be doing this in AutoCAD. The point is that ArchiCAD's not going to do it for us. We actually need to understand all of this construction know-how as well. Now we can see that all of my pens are very dark. They're very vibrant in terms of color, but I don't really like the look of that. So I'm going to dilute them using lighter grays and using lighter colors so that it doesn't look quite so strong. I'd prefer a pastel look, because at the end of the day, someone could photocopy this into black and white, and I wouldn't want everything to look black because of that. I'd prefer blacks to look blacks and colors to look white. So therefore I want to use light colors so that they don't look overbearing for the person who's reading the drawings. All right, where am I going to place this one? I'm going to place this one aligned with the outside face of the concrete. We're going to call the outside face the left side face at the moment. And when I place it face to face, the thickness of the concrete is thicker than the outside line of the brick. And so we see that it's sort of hidden a bit. And this is a reality of drafting, that we don't actually necessarily want our drawings to be real. Sometimes we need to leave gaps between them, particularly when we're trying to show things like flashing. We also know that my brick does not sit directly onto my concrete. There should actually be a mortar joint. So I'm going to drag away my brick 10 millimeters. And I'm going to place another fill between them now, which is mortar. So when I look through my list again, I don't want to keep doing this all the time, but when I start, I need to start somewhere. So what am I going to use? There's one that's called sand, and there's one that's called render. I'd suggest that both of these are very good to use for mortar. Again, I want the pen to be 2 this time because it's a dot, and I want the background color to be white. So I could make that either 11 or 19 would be fine. And I'll draw this the same way. This time I don't need to add in a number because I've already drawn 110. I want to go down, place. Now, I want the outline. What I didn't say is I want the outline to be less important again. So I'm going to make the outline number 2 this time. And I'm going to right-click and say display or to send to back. I want the mortar to be sent further back so it doesn't block the top of the concrete and it doesn't block the bottom of the brick. So we're getting display order happening right now. Now sometimes our mortar joins in real life construction will be flush, and that's what we're seeing at the moment. And sometimes they'll be set back and they would be done in different ways. So it might be a struck joint. There's a lot of technical terms for this. It could be steeled. It could be raked, rounded. So we could set it back by pressing offset and say, let's set that back maybe 5 millimeters. We could do it like that.
Can you regenerate your view with a shortcut?
There's something wrong with your screen. Zoom in and zoom out, see if that helps. Oh,
So if it happens in AutoCAD, I see RE and it regenerates the view.
it shouldn't happen though.
Wasn't it before?
Yeah, I think it is. We'll go back to there and then back in again. Oh, it's crazy. just draw if you can. Zoom out and zoom back in if that helps, but otherwise you might want to try a different screen, different computer. So if we want to, instead of sinking that back, if we want to, the most common, I guess, joint to do would be a raked joint. So to do that, we want to create a curved edge. So we can use our left click on it. Let's just change this to true line weight at the moment, just so it's cleaner to see. We want to click on the face, not the corner, the face. Change this to curve the edge, and then we can add a radius to it. Now, you need to ask yourself, is this worth doing? Is this worth doing at the scale that we're talking about? Because the problem is, we can zoom, we can zoom in so far, but when this is printed at 1 to whatever, is it going to matter? The way we know if that's going to be the case is by testing. So we can right-click, turn on true line weight, and then we can say, well, are we going to be printing this at 1 to 5, at 1 to 10, or at 1 to 100? And then that's going to tell us how much detail we should go to. So obviously at 1 to 5 or 1 to 10, that looks great. At 1 to 100, it looks ridiculous. So you need to find a scale that's appropriate and a level of detail that's appropriate for the scale that you're working at. Question? Did I answer your question? Yeah. Now it seems like we've done a lot of work to draw 3 fills, but the good news is that once we've done a little bit of work and done it really well, our life gets much, much easier for that. So let's say we don't want to draw 1 brick, we want to draw 10 bricks. Can I have everyone watch this, please, for a second? So if I want to draw 10 bricks, can everyone watch this, please? So I've got 1 brick and 1 mortar. I could group them together if I wanted to, but I don't really need to. I'm going to right-click, move, multiply, and I want to spread 86 millimeters because that's a brick plus 10 mil mortar, and then I've now got a wall of bricks. So once we've drawn something, multiplying it becomes incredibly easy. And so it takes a little bit of work to set these up, choose good fills, choose good pens, get everything drawn millimeter accurate, but once you've done that, life gets very, very easy from that point onwards. Let's copy that. So in an engaged pier, we then have another brick often. Which we see in elevation. So in elevation, what should a brick look like? It shouldn't have a hatch. So it should just be empty. And we could keep it as a color, or it could just be white. We will see the mortar gap in this particular instance, the way this has been built. And we won't see the mortar joint like this. Again, that will be white. So we'll pick up the settings of that one, Alt, and Control Alt to make this one white as well. And now we could go move, multiply, and do exactly the same thing. So now we have a brick that we're cutting through and a brick that we're seeing in elevation. It's very uncommon that we will now have a brick. This is what it looks like at our Thurul project. It's very uncommon that we will have a brick that looks like that now, though. Instead, we will tend to have a brick that is 2 bricks wide. So I will always be coming back to what it should be and what it is. So I will delete some of these now, and we'll extend this one another 120 millimeters, and we'll take this one and we'll copy it 120 millimeters. Then once we've made a pattern, so we have a full brick and 2 half bricks, then we can select those and multiply. This time, what do we want to do? To multiply, right click, move, multiply, we now need to double that number. The other way would be to go move, drag multiple copies, if we were uncertain of what we needed to do, and using a reference point, make sure they all line up. Now once I'm finished, in order to make this easy, I should edit, grouping, group. So that way I can find it very quickly and make any changes that I need to make to it. One thing I just did then was to change the representation of how I showed that mortar joint for the bricks in elevation. Because I want that mortar joint to look like it's fluid, to look like it's all continuous, what I did is instead of using a fill for the mortar joint, because it's only now in elevation, I just used an arc. So I just used an arc to show the close, and then of course I could do the same thing at the top if I needed to. Move, rotate. So that now looks like it's closed where it should be, and it looks like it's fluid all the rest of the way through. There's a lot of different ways you can make this look. It doesn't really matter, to be honest. It's not that important. I just wanted to, whenever I'm trying to show you something, I want to try to be as accurate as possible and show you different ways of doing it. If we want to select, let's say we want to select all of the bricks that are in section, so we could of course click and press Control or Shift and then multiple. So click, 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 we could do it like that. But let's say there was hundreds and we don't want to do it like that. Can everyone watch, please? So if we want to find multiple things, we want to use the Find and Select tool. So we want to go Edit, Find and Select. This is an incredibly powerful tool. It takes a little bit to get used to, but it's incredibly powerful. So if we Alt, click, it's going to realize we want to select fills. But then we don't just want to select fills because everything's a fill. So what do we want to do? We want to add more values. So we need to add something which is going to help us identify that this is a brick. So let's choose the fill type. Add. So now it's going to choose only the ones that are brickwork. Of course, if I wanted that to be concrete, I could Alt-click and that would now choose concrete. But if I want it to be brick, Alt-click, now it's going to choose all of the ones that are brickwork. So if I now press plus, it'll choose just all of those ones. So this is a very, very useful tool, and we can store these selections, preset them, or we need to just be able to go add, add, add as many times as we need to be able to custom select something, edit, grouping, group. And so if I want to change those settings, I need to select them all and then go, okay, I actually want to make that a darker orange, for instance. We can't inject into multiple settings simultaneously. We can only edit settings simultaneously. So if we wanted to say, I want this brick to be solid, I'd have to do that one at a time. So what am I doing here? I'm pressing Alt and Command or Control. That Alt is to pick up settings. I drop. Alt Control or Alt Command is to inject settings. Now because this is not just a strip footing, but an edge beam, we now need to increase this concrete. We need to add 2. So I'm deliberately creating the fill in some ways, like I said, wrong, so I can show you how we can use different settings in ArchiCAD. So we're going to add to this fill this time. So we're going to select the fill, click on an edge, and say plus, which is this add to polygon. Now I want to add a shape which is the thickness of a slab. So I'm going to move across, again using my rotated rectangular method, click, move down, and let's say I want this slab to be 120 millimeters. 120, enter, and it will draw that for me, and it will add it to it. So we see that there's no join, it's one slab. One fill, which is representing a slab. Now let's say I also want to add in a thickened corner. I want to make this edge here, these junctions, have a fillet. So what I could do is draw a line, and I'll make it 100 millimeters long, and I could move it down. I could draw another line, and then I could connect those lines. So that's one way that I could basically get that angle. How else could I get that angle? I could go to my settings here, which allow me to snap to something. What do I want to snap to? Maybe I want to snap to a distance, and I want that distance to be 100 millimeters. So now if I hover here, it's going to give me 100 millimeters, and if I hover here, it's going to give me 100 millimeters. So now I've more effectively been able to determine where 100 millimeters is. So that was quite easy as well. Now what if I want to add into this shape more concrete? Again, I can go left click, add to polygon, but this time I'll use magic wand, spacebar, and based on the fact that I'd created a polygon, I'd created a shape, I can now add that into there. Cool. Alright, let's keep going. I want to add a 50 mil sand bed underneath this concrete slab, so I'm going to now change this to half. So when I hover over here, it tells me where halfway is. I don't need to draw a line, I can do this straight away. So I can go to sand, make sure it's representing the way I want, click, click. It's too big. What do? Use the split tool. Split, click, it's defining based on this angle, click, click in the direction I want to select, press delete. Again, display order, maybe I need to do this, select, display order, center back. Do I want to have a line outlining my fill? Not really, so I can select it and turn that line off. So now I have a fill, but no outline around that fill. I want to do the same thing now, but I want to make it gravel. Rather than drawing it again, because I want it to be the same shape, I'm just going to drag a copy and then offset the edge. And this time I want to change it now so it is gravel. One of the problems you always find is, what are you looking for? So this one's called gravel, and this one looks okay. It's a pretty good one. But there's lots and lots of different types. So there's one that's called river rock, and we see it's the same sort of thing, but it's much, much bigger. So there's one that's called hardcore, and again, it's similar, it's different. There's one that's called field stones, and that's more of a cobblestone. So there's lots and lots of different things that we could use. We need to always be looking to see, well, what's going to be the most appropriate for what we're trying to create. Because it's gravel, because we're trying to create little rocks, I'll change it to pen 1, because I want the pen to be thin. Now I want to do earth, I want to do dirt. I don't like the earth fill very much. If I'm looking for it, I start typing it, earth. So I've created my own. What should the earth look like? I want it to be a thin pen. I could have the background as a color if I wanted to, like a brown if I wanted to. Dirt, or I could just leave it as white. Generally speaking, I just leave it as white. Where do I want it to be? I want it to be everywhere. So I could draw a big shape like this. Again, I'm trying to do things to be able to show you something. Maybe I want the background to be transparent, but I don't want it to be where everything else was. So I'm going to select it, and this time I'm going to do subtract from polygon. I could also do offset edge. And so there's a lot of different ways to do that. Now with the earth, I don't want an outline either, so I could get rid of that outline. But maybe I do want an outline where the actual dirt is. So I will get a thick line, maybe at 0.6 this time. and draw a thick line along here. So there's an outline just for the top edge, but I don't want an outline for that bottom edge. Maybe I don't want it to be that precise. I want it to look a bit messier. So what I could do is press subtract, and I could just draw a zigzag shape with the polygon method. So now my earth's a little bit more natural. I don't want to see the edge of my concrete, because if I show an edge like that, that means that it's terminating there. That means there's an actual edge of the concrete. Instead, I want it to show that it's continuous. So my choice would either to be use a break line. I could draw a break line, I could use a symbol as a break line, or I could use, if I'm doing this for more of a presentation, I will use a white fill, which ghosts or hides the end. And of course I just need to turn the outline off. And now I can see the fact that this probably runs through, but it sort of it terminates without a line. And that white fill now means that I am showing continuation. I'm just not showing what's happening beyond that point.
Oh, you're so quick. I'm just following, but I can't, you know?
So I'll stop now, and I'll come and sort of show you the next bits.
That would be good. Stop. Let's get back to this.
So the next step is we're going to add to the concrete slab.
So what was that alt? We should be.
What do you want to do? So some things I'm showing you I don't want you to do. So I was just showing you how to pick up settings and to place settings. That's a question that Robert asked. It's not something that you need to do. So leave that for now. What I want you to do is to add to the concrete slab. So
Yeah,
I'll show you.
The alt control was what I was after.
Yes.
That was.
Yeah.
So
So
then keep picking the tool.
sure, yeah. So the alt control is faster, but then if you needed to do it to 1,000,
Yeah.
that's where the find and select is important.
So how did you get that minded edge?
I did it a couple ways.
Yeah, that's the easiest way. The second way.
Yeah.
You
So the second way-
Distance.
Yeah, so I'll redo it. Just copy and paste. All right, I'm going to delete everything and show you again, slowly. All right, back to here. We're going to add in the concrete slab. So we've got a concrete footing. We're going to add in a concrete slab. We're going to select the fill. We're going to click on an edge or a corner, it doesn't matter, and to bring up a little pet palette. We then want to use the option that's called Add to Polygon. What this means is we're making the size bigger. We're not creating a new one, we're adding to it. Then we're going to draw a shape. I'll use the rotated rectangular method again because I find it's the best one. I want to go, in this case I'll go down because that's the dimension I know that I care about. I want to go down 120 millimeters and then we'll go across whatever I want it to be. Again, the length is not important in this instance because that's continuous, right? It just goes on and on and on. And I'm just going to mask that later and hide that edge. But basically, that's all I want to do for now. Yep.
Oh, okay. Because mine is like.
I'm not sure either. It could be a few different things. Yeah, so what you've done is you use a different type of fill, which is fine. But you use this one relative to the origin. We're just going to change this to relative to the origin.
So we go there, click on it.
Click on the edge, click on the corner, and that gives us the ability to add to polygon.
120.
120 down, doesn't matter how long it is, just longer.
120.
Then, the next question was how do we add that fillet, that little corner? The fastest way that I just did was to use my snap points. Now, if you've turned on this little toolbox called the control box,
Yep.
if we click on the options, one of those options is distance. Then we can type in a distance. Now you might find that you've got the same thing up here. I do. Mine's over here. Yours is probably on the left-hand side. To do yours up the top box, if you want to use that one, you have to click on Snap Options. Then you go down the bottom to Set Snap Point Values. And then you do the same thing. It's exactly the same place. Sorry, it's exactly the same function. It's just a different place and way of finding it. Again, thanks ArchiCAD. So we want distance 100. Now what that means, it's going to give us distance 100 from any endpoint. So if I hover over this corner, look what happens. It brings up these little swatches, slashes. It gives me a snap point. So I can click on a snap point, and then if I move to the other side, it does the same. It gives me another snap point. So I can move to it and draw a line based on those snap points. So now I've drawn a line, but I haven't actually increased my fill. So I'm going to again add to fill. So I'm going to left click on the fill, add to fill, or in this case add to polygon. And then how do I do it? I could draw the shape, but that's a slow way. A faster way is to magic wand. So I spacebar, and because it's a closed shape, it's defining that area, magic wand, and that defines that for me very quickly. Let's say you'd drawn some lines in order to do this, and you didn't know if there was lines or not. If you hover over something, if you hover in ArchiCAD, it'll make it blue, whatever you've selected or whatever you're hovering over. So if I found a line here, and I wasn't sure if there was something underneath it, I could press tab, 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 and it'll go around in circles, right? But it's toggling between all of the things. So what's happening here is I've got a fill, and I've got two different lines. So if you're not sure if you've got other things, hover over, and you can then hover over and press tab to toggle between them, and then you can delete anything that you don't need. So that's a way of finding out what you have and what you don't have. All we were doing was using subtract from polygon. So if we want to create a nice jagged edge of Earth, we want to make sure first that the Earth doesn't have an outline. Because if the Earth has an outline, it's going to look like that. So first thing we want to do is turn off the outline. Then we want to select and say subtract from polygon, and then whatever shape we draw using the polygonal method, we need to change to the polygonal method, otherwise it's going to look a bit silly.
Oh, okay, that's what gotcha.
We then just have to make sure we close it. So in this case, I have to draw a box around the outside to say this is the part I want to delete. Now I'm missing one thing. I'm missing a membrane. So we're going to use the long dash line. I'm going to make this a very thick pen. And I'm going to just trace the outside edge of the concrete slab. Where does this membrane sit? Basically, before the concrete is pour the concrete, they place this membrane underneath and then pour the concrete slab into it. And that stops water, moisture from leaking up into the concrete slab. And during the pour, it stops the moisture from leaking out of the concrete into the earth. Now, do I want it to be on the line of the concrete? Maybe. Do I want it to be slightly away from the edge of the concrete? Maybe. So what I could do, apart from I could change to a different type of line, if I wanted it to be away from the concrete, I could select the edge, and this time I'm going to use this method called offset all edges. So left click, offset all edges. So instead of offsetting one edge, I can now offset in every direction. And this is where I was saying that in sometimes when we're drafting, we actually are faking it. We are making it look right, even though in a reality that's not quite right. So in the same way, we could grab the edge of the earth and offset it in every direction so it sits outside of that fill. And it might be faster to offset every edge and then fix the ones that are wrong. Or we might just offset one at a time, depending on what we feel is going to be the most time effective.
How do we can better the lines?
So if you select a fill, you can turn off its outline. But then at the very end, we need to use a cover fill. We need to use a white fill to hide the end. So we want the concrete slab to still have an edge. So I'm using a cover fill, a white fill, to hide the edge of the concrete slab. See how the concrete edge is exposed? So I'm using the cover fill, a white fill here, to hide the edge of the concrete slab.